So one of the things that I have an issue with is when you read the words 12 million people. Those are just sales. Around the tail end of the crew life cycle, if you actually look at Steam charts, which is again just one example of people playing on the PC. Obviously, the game was released on Ubisoft and other platforms, but let's look at how many people were playing the crew. So when you look at the crew, typically around its release on Steam, December 2014, it had 12,000 something players. And obviously around 2018, when this massive drop-off occurred, this is when Ubisoft released the Crew 2 and then later the Crew Motorsport. So the amount of players that existed at this point, at least on Steam, did not show a significant amount of players. And this was obviously not worth more than paying to keep the game alive. And obviously, the Crew being a racing game with real-world vehicles, they had to worry about licensing costs and everything else. So eventually, Ubisoft pulls the plug for this multiplayer, live service game that they had. Now, this is where I sort of deviate from Thor or Pirate Software's example. Now, obviously, when you're developing a game, what happens with multiplayer stuff is client server-side development. So sometimes there is genuine calculations that are happening on a server. And obviously, the client in this situation simply communicates back and forth with the server to get, whatever it needs just to keep the game functioning. Now, it could be argued that the Crew, this racing game, probably could have calculated a lot of that logic on the actual box itself, like on your local system. So you could just play the game's campaign and the game's single player components basically by yourself without ever needing to worry about the multiplayer. Now, depending on how they coded the Crew, maybe this was possible, maybe it wasn't. But one of the actual, mentions in this entire initiative is that towards the end of life, maybe it should be the responsibility of these publishers or developers, at least as large as Ubisoft, to find and finance some sort of way to keep offline functioning.